Webcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the GALA webinar series. My name is Manuela Noske, and I'm the Communications Manager here at GALA. GALA is a global non-profit trade association that serves an international community of organizations and individuals to enable communication and business across languages and cultures. We are headquartered in Seattle, Washington, in the United States. And today we're going to have a presentation about careers in the localization industry by Denise Baczynski. I will hand it over to Denise in just a moment, but as always, I have a few housekeeping items to go over. First, everyone's lines are muted to cut down on any noise. If you experience any technical difficulties, let me know by using your chat box and I will work with you to troubleshoot them. If you have a slow internet connection, your audio may be disrupted. If that happens, you can use the number listed on the GoToWebinar panel to call in using your own phone. We are making recording of this presentation and you will be able to find it following the presentation on GALA's global website. All participants will receive a link. If you have any questions or comments, please type them into your chat box throughout the presentation. We will get to as many questions as we can with the time remaining after the presentation. Lastly, we will have a survey after this webinar, which is your opportunity to tell us what you think about today's session, but just as importantly, what other related topics you may be interested in. So please use that survey to tell us what other career topics you would like to hear about. Next, I'll introduce Denise. Denise Baczynski began working in the localization industry in 1999. She held positions at vendor and client-side companies in program management and globalization strategy until 2006. From 2006 until 2013, Denise transitioned to recruitment and placed language industry professionals and executives in companies all around the world. Since 2013, Denise has been focusing on career coaching and developed an online self-paced job search program called Project Me Pro. She also provides a one-on-one career coaching to clients who seek out her advice. Denise, thank you for joining us today, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you. What an impressive introduction. You sound like you're do this all the time on radio or something. So it's kind of a hard act to follow, very professional.
It's my next career, Denise.
I'm impressed. I'm impressed. Yeah, it's great to be able to have the opportunity to speak over the internet like this. I love that we can present, kind of in this this easy way online to lots of people. So thanks for having me here. I just wanted to go ahead and get started. I think, as you can see on this landing page, I wanted to mention that I just recently had the opportunity to contribute to Multilingual Magazine. And so the timing of this webinar is, I thought it was really great that it was all kind of around the same topics where we can talk about careers in the industry, and I can bring some of the information that I know about, hopefully to be help to folks that are joining us today. So just a little bit about me. Like the introduction said, I've been working in the localization industry for a while. I'm now officially in that place where I can say I've been doing this for 20 years, which I'm not used to, but it creeps up on us, I guess. But I did have the opportunity to enter this industry kind of haphazardly. I was a foreign language major in college and luckily found this career path. So over time, I did have the chance to work in many different capacities. I worked as a vendor, project manager in several roles, and then I spent several years at a large client-side organization, Hewlett-Packard, in a really unique position that was strategic in nature, which meant that I got to work in very unique ways. I did a lot of program management, but I also would work with vendors. I worked with other departments in our company. I worked in implementing new technologies to support localization, just on and on. And I also participated quite a bit in the industry conferences. So it was really great overview kind of position. And as time went on, I shifted and I started to do recruitment. And recruitment didn't come naturally, but a lot of recruiters find themselves recruiting for something that they know a lot about. And so that was my situation. So I used to work with a partnership with several other folks that were located in different parts of the world. But my job and our job was to place specialized localization talent into companies. And as that went on, the recruitment also incorporated the need to coach people in their careers. So that prompted me I stopped doing recruitment after a while and started to do more coaching. And so I set up this practice, Localization Career Advisors. And that's really great because it's a flexible arrangement where I get to work with people one-on-one, and it's very specific around localization. I know when I was, navigating my own career, we just didn't have a lot of that kind of guidance. So I've been enjoying working with people on a one-on-one basis. However, I noticed that the career coaching process is repetitive in some ways. We teach people when they're looking for jobs or transitioning or kind of contemplating their careers that there's certain things that people need to go through in their own management. And that's where Project Me Pro came from. So that was, I attribute it, it's funny. I say that it was a form of laziness on my part because in career coaching or getting anybody prepped for whatever part of their career path they might be in, and maybe they're looking for a new job or kind of wanting to change gears or something, there are always like several things that people need to do. So this was my effort to make a lot of that available, that somebody could prepare themselves online. And then it kind of couples with career coaching. So that's kind of where these two come from. And just to illustrate that that's, I think a lot about how to enable other people in their careers. But today is all about localization. So this is what we're going to talk through. And my objective is to try to get through this in 30 minutes. So we'll have a lot of time for conversation. So I hope that you guys will feel really comfortable chiming in and asking questions. I put a lot in here, so wish me luck. I'll try to talk quickly but clearly. And what this is intended to do is basically frame the industry in general terms, the way the employment landscape kind of looks. This mirrors the article I wrote. So if you do have a chance to catch that, that would be great. It's sort of the same idea in there where we talk about, in this industry and specifically, we have, the different types of employers, clients, and LSPs. I'm going to go through the different positions in the industry. Kind of a brief description of what each position kind of generally does and also the skills. And I'll talk about why I talk about that. And then the career paths, when you are ready to make a transition from where you are, where you started, onto new things. And then discovery and exploration. How do you kind of, because it's such a personal process, how do you work on that for yourself? So that's where we're going to start. So the first thing, and this is for the purposes of this presentation too, I don't know if people have come up with new ways of characterizing our groupings of employers, but this is kind of old school stuff. We used to call them client side positions and LSPs, and I always stuck with that. It makes a lot of sense to me. The clients buy services and the LSPs sell the services, all related to the stuff in this industry. And what's great about this is each of these categories of employers have really good pros and cons to them. I think I've had experience on both sides, both as a recruiter, both as an employee, and I've found that there were just great things on both sides and also drawbacks that I just sort of wanted to highlight. So I think traditionally speaking in the industry, the client side positions are more coveted and maybe held in high esteem. And that's great. It makes a lot of sense. These are the companies that are basically purchasing, the services. They're managing a lot of the localization inside their own organizations. The advantages of that too is that they can pay really well, relatively speaking. The salaries can be really good, competitive salaries. And you also find that companies that are in these client positions they have really varied and interesting industries that they come from. So I find that really fascinating. My own experience was in tech, but all the time I run across people who do fascinating stuff. Like I just ran across somebody, while this, who reached out when we were advertising the webinar, and she works in like fashion trending and, so I'm always like poking around to see what people are doing. What I've noticed, though, is a challenge, it's just to be aware of, is inside of client organizations, localization folks can tend to be a little bit pigeonholed or reach a ceiling. And I'm happy to talk about that a little bit more. You know, at some point or another, people may want to change jobs within their organization and find that they're always kind of tagged with this international localization kind of label, which isn't a terrible thing, but it can take some deliberate planning to make a transition. And also, client companies can be extremely volatile. They reorg, they change, they go through lots of acquisitions and so forth. So that's something that we notice. LSPs are really great in this industry, is very specific. These companies, there are many, many of them doing lots of different kinds of things. I had the honor of working with several, I mean, many companies that had different specializations and different kind of areas of expertise that they would bring to the table. Oh, some of the challenges, though, is that some of them can be small, not all of them, but they can be small. And if that's the case, then their resources can be a little bit limited, both in the ability to pay good salaries and also your own ability to grow and change. But this is just something to be aware of. So what I did here is I made an effort to kind of group positions, very generally speaking. And this comes from my experience in recruitment, that we noticed patterns, that there were always these kind of groupings of jobs that would come forward that we would have to staff for. And so there are some outlier positions that I know that people have, but generally these 7 groups are really, they kind of are a nice pattern, and I thought I'd use this as the basis of our discussion. So the LSPs have all these positions, and client companies tend to have everything except for sales. So that's just something to think about, is that these different roles do show up on both sides of the employment fence, I guess, except for sales, which is very unique to a company trying to establish relationships with buying companies. And this is another way that this makes sense to me, and I wanted to pass on to you, is that there are kind of groupings of types of positions. This is stuff I made up, but I think it might make sense to you too, is that language and linguistics is really like its own bubble on its own. It's very specialized around language, huge part of the industry, really important. But from an employment standpoint, it really is unique on its own. The yellow is to signify what I refer to as business positions. These are ones that deal with like schedules and budgets and resourcing and different kinds of things that are very businessy, if that makes sense. And then the 2 in green is what we group into technical roles, where it's diving a lot deeper into the technical aspects and the actual production aspects of the projects and of the programs that people do. And this slide was just to give kind of a little nod to when people are starting to think about entering into localization. These are really good entry points. If so, there's been occasions where I've been invited to speak at, in some of the programs that are teaching localization, and people who are really interested in getting into this industry. And so I mentioned that these are kind of nice doorways. And it also helps in people like looking to transition from one place or another. So I'm going to quickly-ish, let me look at my time, try to quickly just touch on the skills and responsibilities of the roles without going into too much detail. And all of this will be made available later so you can look at it. This is also directly drawn from the multilingual article too. But, as an overview for language and linguistics, we know like this is the nuts and bolts of the linguistic side of things. And I wanted to highlight the skills that people come to this type of position and do really well at. And so I don't know if it's just me because I think about careers a lot, or if as someone who is, doing your job and you think about yourself and what kind of skills you have that lend themselves to your position. But this is kind of something that I wanted to get into the conversation if you haven't done it before. Because what my experience is that people will study something and kind of start to pursue a career path and be a little bit puzzled that it's uncomfortable or that it doesn't fit them right, or they're not sure why they're not doing very well in it, or they feel like they're struggling more than other people. And then basically, from a career coaching standpoint, we would stand back and say, well, does that fit your skills and interests? Are you really the type of person that linguistics would fit? And so in this case, linguistics and people who are translators, interpreters, really strong language experts have this set of skills like attention to detail, working independently, really being able to dive deep into a specialty area. That's a certain temperament of person. Like I can say in my own experience, just to give you an example, I was a language major, but I tried translating and it was a terrible match for me. I was not a strong translator, and it wasn't because necessarily that my language skills weren't good. I didn't have the attention to detail and I couldn't sit still that long, if that makes sense. But as I moved into other roles, like this role that I'm doing right now takes kind of like higher level thinking, that I'm speaking in public, I'm telling you what I think about something. That's something that is a totally different type of thing. So it's just starting to give you a sense of, you know, where we match each other. And I'm like many people, I tried on this, I tried on project management, I, you know, transitioned through my job, and that's something that you might find yourself doing as well. So project management, program management, all these different kinds of roles are a huge part of the industry in general. They're shifting and changing. There are levels of seniority. It's a terrific entry point into the industry. You know, the traditional things is that it's trying to organize a big group of people to do a lot of complicated things on time and on budget. And that could change, like, depending on what the person is responsible for. And the skill sets that go along with project management are really about being able to handle lots of things at once and have a strategic view of how to do complicated things in an organized way. You also have to have like really strong negotiation and persuasion skills because project managers have to get lots of different people to kind of play along and do what they promised to do in a way that is going to make it come out in the end in a really good way. Presenting and communicating really clearly is important, and also just being able to work with lots of people. So someone who is more comfortable being on their own private and focusing probably would be uncomfortable in project management, generally speaking. From localization and internationalization engineering, this also could be lots of things: audio engineer, you know, DTP folks, anything that's kind of technical in nature that requires something really specific. Kind of fits in this little category in my mind. And this is where, you know, you really get down into it with complex tools, how they work together, how they work with languages and so forth. It takes a lot of technical aptitude and patience for things like that. This is another thing personally I couldn't do. I can't even see code. Like I can't, if you miss a comma, your whole thing breaks. That would make me nuts. But I know that there are some people that just have that razor sharp kind of attention to detail, and they see things so clearly like that. Plus it's complex and it works together like a puzzle. So that kind of temperament is going to do really well in positions like this. Also patience with things breaking and things, you know, needing fixing all the time, and the kind of changeability that has. For some people that would cause so much panic, it would be too stressful, but for people who fit in this role, it's just par for the course. So there are a lot of really great opportunities in this industry for folks with technical aptitude. As far as QA, compliance, testing, I group this in a related way to engineering, but it also is it's a different temperament. I mean, sometimes people start out in QA and they do really well here, but it is terrific for people who are able to see problems, can focus for long periods of time. They can be really organized and very nitpicky, and it's super valuable. It's a little bit different. It does that check and balance with the engineering processes, and you know, it's even in linguistics too. So this is a very specific kind of temperament as well, but highly valued and in the process in general. So like sales folks, now this is a position I mentioned is only on my LSP side, really. I I don't see why you'd need somebody on the client side. But salespeople are really abundant positions in the localization industry. They're super valued. If somebody is an excellent salesperson, everybody will want you and pay you like loads of money. And it's basically because the position is pretty unique and pretty difficult, and it fits a certain profile of person. There are different kinds of sales activities. Some is relationship building, some is trying to find new business. So these are the people that are tasked with, at an LSP, to go out and meet companies and say, buy our services, let us work for you, let us bill you, let's become partners. And that takes a lot of persuasion, persistence, really deep knowledge of sales techniques and how to do that really well. And that is not for everybody. It can be really difficult. They are told no a lot, but these are the folks that really like when they get a win, they feel pretty energized, and that will be motivating for them. Other people want to run hiding, and it's a pretty specific kind of thing. So then here we're starting into the management kind of roles. Operations managers, vendor managers, these are the folks that kind of help keep the ship running, but have a really good handle on how the different functional areas work, who is staffed in what position, may do hiring and that kind of thing. Really has to have an excellent skill set for working with different kinds of people in an employment kind of point of view. So doing employment reviews, sometimes that can be difficult and sensitive. So that's a position for a certain type of groups of people as well. I've met a lot of people who are very senior in their career, and they found themselves having a very difficult time in management positions. So in my article I mentioned, and I often say this, is not everybody's supposed to be the boss. It's because it's just a certain kind of personality that will do well there. But vendor management too is basically trying to qualify different groups of people that you're going to work with. And then we have managers and executives, kind of a general role. This may be business owners on an LSP. This may be, if you're on a client, kind of your upline managers. These are folks that set strategy and will exude kind of confidence, and they'll go and kind of try to motivate everybody and pull it all together. And there also is a big financial component to this kind of role. So again, it's sometimes, I think, people who, especially if there's strong ambition, will think, oh my God, I can't wait to be the boss, or I'm going to be the boss one day. But if you don't like working with numbers or finance or being responsible for money, it won't work for you. And I don't know if that's always very obvious, but that's basically their main role, setting strategy and making sure that there's money. So it's kind of a simple way to put it. So I wanted to quickly run through some career paths. And these are just general ideas. Everyone's individual situation is going to be a little bit different, but it can give you a feel for, if you start in a particular role or you're currently in a particular role, how you might be able to transition out into something new, or because we all want to grow, I think. I do meet people that are perfectly fine in their job forever. I don't want to make too many generalizations, but I think as careers go on, people do find that they're like, yeah, I'm up for a new challenge, or I want to try something new. So to start with linguistics and the language experts, this one down here at the bottom, the entrepreneurial path, is actually really common. A lot of times people form companies because they started out as a translator, and those turn into LSPs. That's pretty common, but it does take a mind shift. What might happen is that somebody's been translating for a really long time, or offering their skills, and they're like, yeah, I'm just getting too much business. I need to bring in maybe more people to work with me. Maybe somebody can support me and I can get an assistant or an accountant, and then suddenly they're forming a company. So that's pretty interesting. And then in that case, people in those roles can have some challenge. They go, okay, well, I'm actually a translator. I'm really good at this, but they have to also learn how to be a business person. So that's their professional development path in that case, but that's pretty common. But saying that, let's say a translator, an interpreter, somebody wants to transition into different roles within a company, a QA and testing is a great start, because they could start with linguistic testing. They could do testing of maybe some products or, all that kind of thing that basically gives that attention to detail, and they can build on that. And those go on, QA can go into engineering maybe, or, we all kind of move around a little bit. But another really good path could be project management, because they know what it takes to work as a linguist, as a key part of a program, and just learn what it's like to kind of program manage from there. Project management also, you can build on those kind of roles and transition. At the top here, the operation and vendor management is very natural, because you'll have an understanding of what it's like to do the program, so you would support a group of project and program managers really well. Project manager could be really good on a sales team, because it's subject matter expertise. So as there's an opportunity, let's say for a new client to come in and work with your company, you would be able to speak to them on a really expert level, and that's really valuable. Another path, of course, is to become more technical. So that takes a little training. We'd have to learn the tools better and some of the skills, but it's something that I've seen from a transitional standpoint. So I grouped these two together, QA and localization engineering. And, people can move into project management too, for sure, or managing, like becoming a technical lead or a technical department manager. It's also very natural. And then there's a lot of credibility in that, because if you have done the work and had, been really hands-on, you'll find that if you find yourself in a management position, the people who you're managing can trust that you know what they're talking about. Sometimes there's a gap in communication with highly technical roles in their managers. So that can work out really well. Sales and account management are really natural. They naturally transition into executive management. There are certain companies we find that are, I used to say, like they're either led by someone who's like kind of sales oriented, about relationship building, or they might be led by someone who's very technically oriented, or, it depends on the kind of culture of the different companies. But that's a kind of a pretty natural career path for people who start in sales. Another one too is marketing and PR, which is a component or like a complementary type of activity from sales. And it helps about like trying to raise visibility of your company to potential clients who would hire you. And it's always about relationship building and getting your word out and getting branding. So that's a pretty interesting path. And they could also kind of get into the operational side and go into project management. So this slide here is to talk a little bit about thinking for yourself. So in your own position today, what you're doing, and if it fits you and you really like what you're doing, you feel like you just hit the kind of a nice happy medium where you like it, you're good at it, that's excellent. I find that it's not uncommon that people might start going, God, something just doesn't feel right. I need to think more about this. So this is what I encourage, is this idea of self-reflection. And, career coaches will help you with that. If you find that you have to find a new job for some reason, having this down is going to be very helpful for you. So I talk about this idea about get to know yourself a little bit and consider what do you like and what don't you like in your job. Think about what interests you. Like maybe it's not what you're doing now, but you just started somewhere and you didn't really know better. You have the opportunity to think for yourself about what's going to be a good fit for you. And then I talk about listing what you value in a job or a profession, meaning like, do you want to make a certain amount of money? Do you want to travel? Do you not want to travel? Do you want to work with code? Do you want to work with people? That kind of thing. And that's very personal. There's no right or wrong answer for any of it. It's more what's going to be right or wrong for you in particular. And then there's this idea of self-assessment tests, if you haven't heard of them. There are lots out there, and career coaches love to work with them, and there are several things online. And I wanted to mention them because they can be kind of fun. It's almost like a professionally oriented, like, astrology chart, but it's not astrology, it's made by behavioral scientists. And some of them are kooky, like I take all of them. I love these things, but some of them tell me you're, kind of give me this advice that I should be like a surgeon or something that would be completely inappropriate for me. So take it with a grain of salt. But a lot of these can be really insightful, because if you take these tests, they might reveal some things to you about yourself that you didn't really know. And I've given these different things. This 16 personalities is one that's at the end. I gave that one to my colleagues on my Project Me Pro team, and it was so eye-opening for them, because I noticed that one of the partners I worked with, this is just an example, is a really technical person, very creative, and very much on like kind of the make products kind of part of the, I don't know, the spectrum of what our talents are. And he used to struggle all the time because he had such a hard time with financial management and sales. And he just felt like he was a failure. He's like, I don't know, I just can't get this right. I don't know what this is. But once he took the personality test, he was like, oh, it's just not my strength. And I was sitting there going, well, that's the thing. We have to know ourselves well enough to know what we're good at and where we're not going to be so strong, and find them, kind of a good fit accordingly. So that's my presentation. I'm okay. Oh, not so bad on time. I was hoping to leave about 30 minutes. So I'd be happy to take some questions if you have any.
Well, thanks for the overview, Denise. I find it really helpful. And just as a reminder to our audience, to ask your questions now. This would be a good time. One thing that I've been puzzled by for a while is that there seems to be no clear distinction in the localization industry between a project manager and a program manager. And part of that is, that unfortunately they're both abbreviated PM, right? People say, well, I'm a PM. And then the first question you should really ask is, are you a project manager or program manager? But there is an inherent difference in that the program manager role is a more strategic role, where you really focus on an organization's overall goals and objectives, and you manage related projects, whereas project manager is much more, you'd say, in the day-to-day, making sure that, whatever the deliverables may be, they get completed and a project actually ends, on time and as specified. Why do you think it is that the industry doesn't differentiate between those two? Do you think there's just no need, or is there something else behind it?
And when you ask the question, which is a great one, my head automatically splits into the two arenas, the client position, or the client kind of roles, and then the LSP roles. And I think, since I've been on both sides of the fence, I know inside of client companies, program management is just really the terminology that they would use on any kind of level. So like program manager could be for an entire product, let's say. Then it's like, it could be product manager, program manager, and they do tend to be wider, kind of a wider reach, a more strategic kind of level. And the projects are projects. They could be like, within this program, we have a project related to X, and that is your job. And so people are just kind of playing the parts that they've been assigned. So I think you defined it in a way that's really valid in my experience too. Program management tends to be a little more strategic. Project management tends to be a little bit more kind of hands-on, tactile, and transactional, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. They all like fit together. And I think that program management might be seen as more senior sometimes, just because it can be wider. It's just so folks with more experience might end up in those roles.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for that. And we have a sort of a follow-up question related, in the sense that somebody's asking if you could maybe differentiate between a general sales manager and an account manager. What differentiates those two roles?
Yeah, that's a great question. So sales is kind of split up. So there's a few things. So there's generally a management role that will manage a group of salespeople. That person will do that same sort of thing, or set the strategy, set the goals. They'll kind of like be working with the team in general to try to get them to do what they want. The sales kind of world is all about new clients, new revenue, getting money in the door, which is pretty exciting. It can be a lot of fun for certain people. Traditionally, that those terminologies, salespeople and account managers, the salespeople are the ones that are going out and they're called like hunters. They are people that are making new relationships with new companies, trying to break the ice, trying to get in the door. And that is a really like very extroverted kind of activity. It's like being hungry to go and make new relationships. It's also extraordinarily challenging. Some people do it brilliantly. It's just natural, and some people would just wilt and die at trying to do that because it's hard. It's hard to make relationships when people know you're going to try to sell them something and they have not asked for it. So there's a whole discipline around that. Where account managers tend to be what are also referred to as farmers, that they'll work with clients that are already that the company already has relationships with. So they'll try to either support them in the existing maybe projects that are going on, or ask for more business, or just kind of grow the relationship and maintain it. And that's different. That's more relationship based. So if somebody is really all about, I need to go meet new people and get new business, they won't want to be an account manager. And if somebody can't stand being told no a lot, but they really want to work with clients, they'll be more suited for account management.
Thank you. As predicted, we have a lot of questions now, so let me see which ones we can get through here. Do you have any tips for salespeople regarding trainings, either online or offline, which you would recommend? Any insights there that you could share? For sales specifically.
Off the top of my head, I can think of a few, but I would rather research on that and get back to you.
Sure.
There are so many, and I think that the best salespeople, in my experience, are ones that are constantly learning different approaches. So for a while, there was a lot of like customer-centric selling was that kind of idea, where it's consultative selling techniques, because it's not, localization services are services, and they're complex, and they have a lot of aspects to them, and they take a long time to cultivate. So it doesn't help for companies to try to, cold call a bunch of companies. I mean, when I was working at HP, I was constantly bombarded with sales, and most people in the industry is, and that's how it goes. But I wasn't shopping a lot, for most of the time I was there. Actually, we had just done a big vendor selection process right before I was hired, and I remember feeling like it was just the wrong approach. But when companies worked in other ways to try to either form a relationship or just make a connection but not be intrusive, it was more effective. In the industry, I think that they find the tone is going to be right, but that might be changing, and maybe things are becoming a little bit more transactional. But I know at the time when it was about making relationships, the kind of sales trainings that were going to be appropriate were going to be kind of like what you would do if you were selling consulting. Because it is a service in a way. There are products and tangible things that come out of it, but the relationships, it's not like you go, hey, I'm going to send you this link and go buy it. It's nothing like that. So
thank you for that. We got a question here about globalization manager, and it starts off, and it's really two, but I'll weave them together. What's the difference between a globalization manager and a program manager? But more importantly, where do you typically see a globalization manager sit in an organization? And it's a good question that we didn't touch on, because I think localization can sit under so many umbrellas. So where do you typically see a globalization manager fit in? Is it more product management or a marketing role?
I think it could be either. And I think it's also a kind of a more atypical kind of title. And that was the situation that I personally found myself in, because I didn't have a traditional role. My role was the globalization manager or strategist position, but I didn't easily fit in any of those little bubbles that I showed you, because it was strategic in nature. But it was almost like a specialty role. And so it depends on the company. We can make up our own titles. I think sometimes people like using the globalization language, because it's like a little bit broader and kind of might encompass more things. It might, I know that it could take a more strategic kind of role. Where it sits, you know, that is like, that's very, very dependent on each organization. I think the way that they, wherever they put localization, and kind of the culture of the companies. Some companies are really advanced in the way that they execute on the whole localization, globalization function, and some are trying to figure it out. And the ones that are figuring it out, I think that you find that there are people scattered a little bit amongst different departments. So there might be a person, you know, sitting in marketing, and a person or a few people sitting over in engineering, or, you know, just to give you an example, where I think when it gets to be a little bit more formalized, you'll see departments come together, and then each department will have different roles. And one might be a globalization oriented thing, which tends to be like, hey, I'm going to go and talk to all of our partners because they do not know what we do.
Yeah.
And then like to see their role, you know, like, and that's big. So
Yeah.
makes
Yeah.
it like,
Thank you for that. We got a question here from Doug Porter from Brigham Young saying that he works with university students for studying localization. And one of the struggles that he's identified is that, you know, as helping these students identify or really get a vision for the different paths and opportunities that are really out there. So they think, when they think about localization, mostly about being either a translator or a PM. Any thoughts from your career coaching experience on how to educate those students on all the many different options that are actually out there?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's what the kind of the underlying purpose of this presentation was sort of about, is to start to introduce that conversation, which I'm really glad to continue, because I think it could be helpful as people are figuring out their own way. And I know that this was not really available when I was trying to navigate my own career too. I think I mentioned that we just sort of feel around, we're like, well, I don't know, and where would I go from here? In my experience in career coaching, I know that it's very personal, that each person is going to have to understand what each of the paths have to offer and what they can expect. So I used to use this analogy. When I transitioned into coaching, it was really weird because I felt like people, even strangers, would like approach me and start telling me about their career. I don't, like in Starbucks or, and one person was just started talking to me and said, you know, I've been studying this program, and in this case, she was studying like how to be a physician's assistant, or, you know, that's a kind of a common thing in continuing education. And I looked at her and I said, well, do you know what that job is going to be? You know, do you know what this is going to qualify you for? And she was like, not really. I don't know. It just sounded interesting and sounded kind of important. It's medical. And I said, well, you're basically going to work in an office and you're going to show people to their rooms and maybe take blood pressure and then work on their files. And she was like, well, oh, and, you know, and they hadn't looked down the pipe to say, where is this thing I'm studying going to take me? And I think as with the programs, especially, you know, in this industry specifically, they can say, yeah, I'm going to study program management and project management and linguistics and all this stuff. But where do I kind of want to end up? What is my day-to-day thing going to be like? And so that's what we can try to present to the students and say, hey, they're all good, but what's good for you? And here's what you can expect. So, and, you know, and some people don't have that kind of patience, I think, maybe to look all the way down the pipe. I want everybody to, at least to go, you don't want to go spend all this time accidentally studying code and engineering to find out that you can't stand that stuff, you know, because it's very specific. Or to be in, you know, a linguistic role and be like, I absolutely am so bored with this stuff. Like my experience with translating, because I said, well, I don't know what I do with French. I'll just translate. And they sent me a manual for brakes for an automotive company. And I was like, I don't know what this is, even in English. And I was young and I was just out of school too, but it's that kind of thing that I think as educators, and hopefully with like the support of career coaching, and part of that, just to say, here's what you may be up for, you know, or somebody else who's a really very, you know, I don't know, likes different kinds of translation challenges, that break manual might have been awesome for them. Yeah, that's what we have to think about, because the industry is wide and it's all over. I mean, I just learned about the neatest kind of roles that people play. and that makes the landscape very rich, but without knowing kind of which entry point is going to be suitable, it's kind of
yeah, it's also hard to negotiate then, right? Like, how do you, with all these opportunities out there, how do you fit yourself into it, and how do you understand what's out in this world? Yeah. Thanks for that. Let's move on to this question here, because I think this is not an untypical case. So one of our listeners is saying that he's been working in the internationalization and localization space for 3 years now, and mostly from the operations side, but also doing some vendor management, some QA. So it sounds fairly technically, and it's a position that he built himself. What are the top qualifications that an employer looks for in a localization manager, so more of a PM role?
Yeah, I mean, it's great to have all that varied experience in order to go into project management, because you'll have a sense of what goes into the projects in general. So what you would want to highlight, so here's part of like the, when you are going to step into or toward a particular type of role, is you want to make sure that like your resumes and your LinkedIn and the different materials that you put together will highlight the direction you want to go in. So it sounds like there are lots of different tasks and things that this person has done, which is great. But you're going to want to make a flavor of your resume, let's say, that will highlight typical PM things. So that'll include things like making schedules, managing budgets, assigning resources, doing projects on time, and troubleshooting. And what you can do is go online. I would suggest is to go online and just search around for typical localization PM job descriptions, and you just look at them and say, well, what do they ask for in these roles? And then use that stuff to highlight in your resume and different information where you've actually done those things, and that will kind of make that match, I think.
We have a lot of really good questions here, so I'm struggling which one to surface next. But here's one I think is really good and very reflective, and that is more and more, when you see a project manager job description from a big client company, it asks for some skill set around coding languages like SQL or maybe even more. Will the boundary between localization engineering and an actual PM role blur? And will PMs need to have more and more technical skills?
Yeah, that could be, and I can't say for certain, but that could be a little bit of carelessness on the part of the HR department and the people making the job descriptions. Sometimes so recruiters and HR folks, they're asked to recruit for everything. And sometimes when they start to bridge into really highly technical areas like localization, they may include things that actually don't make a lot of sense, because PMs really don't need to know how to code, honestly. I mean, the engineers would be like, get your hands out of my code. Like we have to keep church and state. Having an understanding of what it is great, but requiring skills and experience in those is not appropriate for the role. So it could be just that they just copied and pasted something from another job description thinking it'd be relevant. It may look a little closer to say, well, I have familiarity with what this stuff is, because PMs do need to know that. If that project management role is to manage technical programs, you're going to need to know what the code is about, kind of the structure, what it does. You don't ever have to even look at it in theory. Yes, but you have to talk to your partners in engineering and know, have a meaningful conversation.
And what may be really hidden behind it is not so much that they want you to actually be technical and coding like a developer, but it may be not in the direction of data analysis and data management, right? So because that is something that more and more PMs need to understand and do, and so maybe that is the sequel, especially saying, we need you to be able to, to understand what's behind it and actually work with the outcome of data.
For sure. Yeah, familiarity. But what I think is, and if there's any employers on the line, I think that job like seekers will get scared off when they see something that they don't fit. And we want to make sure that if you're trying to fill a role, that you're not being so overly specific that people aren't applying who actually could be a really good fit. Like that really does happen, because you'll say PMs do very specific things, and then add a coding component in there, and they'll be like, but I'm not a PM that codes. I don't know what to do with this, and they won't apply. So we want to make sure that job descriptions are, really reflecting what you're looking for.
Yeah. Thank you. Let me give this one here a try, because I think that this is applicable as well. What kind of path can a person create, as apparently doesn't exist yet, to veer from being a linguist translator or language oriented person into a more future-oriented software-related role, or work more on the software-related side of the industry? And so what this person ultimately is asking, do I need to switch to a different company? That is really where my interest lies. Or how do you make yourself appealing to one of those software companies?
Mm-hmm. No, it's an awesome question. It kind of, it's about switching disciplines. So, anyone in any position could actually be asking the same question, just how do you switch out of one lane to another? And I think that what you'll find going from linguistics into more technical roles is doing training. You could keep working at your current role and start to seek out different courses, different programs that will up your technical expertise. Because you can't just learn, you could, I suppose, learn it on the job, but people aren't really going to hire for that. They're going to want to know that you know what you're doing, because it's so specific. So I'd recommend looking to see what's out there in the technical kind of course offerings, and try out a few and see if they fit. You might have an idea of what the technical side is, but if you take a couple of courses, you might feel around and see if it really is a good fit. And that will, show that you've got the qualifications when you want to transition.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We got a very practical question, but that I believe lots of people may have, and that is, when you apply for a job online, how do you get past the bots, right, that sort out your resume right away? Like, what's the trick to actually get your resume into the hands of a human being at HR or even the hiring manager?
Yeah, it is really tricky. This is stuff I teach too in Project Me Pro, which is great. It's and maybe, if it's of interest, I'd be happy to talk about tips on how to apply and make it make it where you actually do connect to a real person. And it's stuff I teach when I coach too, is that, because I've been in a hiring position and a recruiter position, so what basically happens, just to give you a little sense of what folks go through in that role, is like a recruiter is going to put up a job description onto a website, and it's connected to a database. And the database is basically going to collect the applications and the resumes. And so often, unfortunately, the recruiter puts up the thing, and then it gets flooded. There's just there'll be a bunch of people throwing in their resumes, and a lot of them aren't relevant. But it's the recruiter's job to kind of sift through that. And so what the technology, they're called ATS, they're applicant tracking systems. They try to do things like use keywords, do things that are basically going to put certain people toward the top because they kind of match. So in that, understanding that that's the way it works, what you're going to want to try to do is make a specific resume or submission that contains the words from their job description. It'll do an algorithm that'll match it. You're also going to want to make sure, and it takes a little time, but I really recommend it because it's going to float your stuff to the top, both technically, but then also it's going to match, because what they'll do is they'll see sort of a short list, and they'll start to look through everything. Resumes, there's this whole thing. I just go on and on about this when we get on this topic area, but there's a whole thing of just trying to help the recruiter who's going to put you to the next level, make the match. It's like they're trying to solve a puzzle. They're looking for the puzzle piece that'll fit the puzzle. and it's all skills. And can you do this job that we're trying to hire for? So you're going to want to make sure you've got those words in there. Plus, make it easy for the recruiter to see on your resume, oh yeah, this person has done or can do this thing we're trying to hire for. And the third thing is to start to try to do research on the company that you're applying for. This is not going to get you very far with huge companies. It may, but you do research on the company that you're applying for to first see like who might be hiring for this job or who might kind of be in this department. The second is, do you happen to know somebody that works for the company, or do you have somebody in your network that can kind of maybe make a soft introduction or maybe give you some feedback? Or like, you really have to walk this down very carefully. But the idea is to warm up your application, because when you go in cold, you really are in that kind of pile. Hopefully it'll drift to the top. Hopefully you'll get a call and get an interview. But in case it doesn't, you want to try to use your network and your research to sort of try to find a way to say, hey, just letting you know, I put my resume in and would love to talk to you if you'd like. And then you just, make your offerings to the employment gods and and but you do your part to try to warm up the situation.
Yeah. Thank you.
I just want to say I would caution from becoming like too aggressive with things like that. People are busy, and even if I know everyone gets very excited about applying for a job and you start to get a lot of nervousness, but sometimes the time is long just because there's a lot going on.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for that. One quick last question. Terminologists, are they a relic of the past or do they still exist?
It's a great question. It wasn't something I commonly had to, I wasn't often asked to find terminologists. I think it's in the linguistic world. I don't know if I can really answer that question. I mean, It's a tricky one. It's important, but it wasn't something I formally had to do a lot of searching for.
It's very specialized, right? And maybe that's the issue.
It's very specialized, and I don't know if it's something to differentiate like a linguist expert profile to say I'm really good in this, kind of their translation, their interpretation discipline, plus I'm like really strong terminologist. It might be something that can be a benefit in that area, but I don't know.
Thank you. Thanks, Denise. Yeah, thank you so much, Denise. This was a really great overview, and thank you to the audience for all of those great questions. It's been great to have this webinar and have you on. Just one last reminder, we would really appreciate your feedback. A survey will pop up as soon as I close this webinar. And it is short, but your perspectives and your input really help us to continue to refine what we offer in this webinar series. And with that, I wish you a good night or a good day, depending on where you are. And I look forward to seeing you at another GALA webinar soon. Bye-bye.